How's everyone doing? This is kind of a scary episode. We're going to be talking about brain control, mind control, brainwashing, being hypnotized. Also, we're going to be talking about social engineering, which is interesting too. Today we have a hypnotist on the show. Give a warm welcome to Scott Randall.
The interviewer with Beef Tech.
Scott, thanks for being on the show. Kind of a weird video thing going on here. You froze up, but it makes sense because you're a hypnotist, right? How you doing today, man?
We'll use our imagination. That's fine.
What's that?
We'll use our imagination.
Yeah.
Close your eyes and then look up. It's like say where your third eye area would be, and then just put an image there of whatever you want it to be.
So you're not talking my language, man. That's why we're talking today. So, hypnotist, is this now? How long have you been doing it for?
Well, I learned how to do hypnosis back in the 80s, 1987, I think. The guy that trained me, let's see, his name was Dr. Resnick. He was a retired teacher over at Forest View in Des Plaines, Illinois. And he trained me on the basic fundamentals. I think I was like a junior in high school. You know, this is back in the dark ages, of course, before internet, all we had were books, right? So learning was an extremely slow process.
Yeah.
So he basically taught me just as hypnosis would be. This would probably be from like the 1950s. So his style of hypnosis would have been from Elman, from like the 50s. But it basically starts with an interview. If you pass the interview and you're not a complete nutcase, then the hypnotist will explain the fundamentals of hypnosis before starting an actual session. So he taught me different fundamentals. We used a candlelight at that time. Nowadays, hypnotists try not to use light because some people can have seizures, epilepsy and that kind of thing. So we don't use candlelight anymore, although I prefer that. I like using candlelight. I like using candlelight in my peripheral sight more than my direct sight, but there's different ways of doing it. You can also use candles in black mirrors. Okay.
Yeah.
Off topic, but
how long is the training? Just how long did it take you to train?
Different organizations or different people will do different training. The training that I did with him was only a couple of sessions, and we didn't actually pay for it. He was when my mom took me. I don't even know if I could drive at this point, and he was just kind of doing it voluntarily. He was a retired teacher, so I had an interest in it. I was actually researching past lives for a school project, so I was doing a school report. That was my excuse. Obviously for my parents to let me do it, because hypnosis has always kind of been shrouded in sort of weirdness, let's say, or occult or strangeness, witches and witchcraft and hypnotists and all this other nonsense. So that's how I got into it. I did get an A on my paper, and I think I still have the paper on here somewhere, but that kind of got my interest going, and then I just followed up on the fundamentals in what's called a library. Now, if we all remember libraries,
whoa,
it takes forever to get information.
You be talking about Google?
Such a slow process in books, and I mean, how many of us really like sitting down and using books? It's so much easier nowadays. But and then I just tried incorporating the fundamentals in sound. I've always been obsessed with Jimmy Page and using alternate tunings and UFO tunings and this other stuff that people get into now. So he was into the occult and mysticism, and always tried to combine it with music, and he was actually serious about it, whether it's real or not, magic symbols and all this other stuff. So I just tried to bring it all together in hypnosis.
Now, do other people use music for that? For hypnosis?
Well, there's something called digital hypnosis. If you go on the internet and you Google digital hypnosis, you can get all kinds of audio recordings that can be used for hypnosis. So that's pretty popular. Different frequencies that people use, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I heard of different kinds. Now we got people sometimes call brainwashing, mind control, hypnotists, whatever, and then social engineering.
Okay.
And those are the kind of the things that have been floating around that I've seen. Is there what's the difference between like a brainwash and being hypnotized?
Well, hypnosis is just a natural state of mind. There's 5 different brain frequencies. I don't want to get technical because people get confused, but basically hypnosis is kind of just drifting off. Let's say there's something called highway hypnosis. When you're at the wheel and you start thinking about something in your imagination and you kind of lose contact with what's going on in front of you, like your body and your eyes take over and then your mind goes somewhere else. That's called highway hypnosis. Before you fall asleep, when you wake up and you're kind of in the dream state, this is all just natural. A hypnotist can, when someone is under and they're in a hypnotic state, they can apply certain suggestions, and this is something that's considered ethical or unethical. We can offer positive or negative suggestions when someone is actually under. Now, that's just natural hypnosis, not using drugs or electricity or anything too crazy. I'll just try to segue that into like ufology. When you hear stories about people that have had either been given drugs and then also a combination of drugs and hypnosis to try to suppress memories or suppress statements or comments or involvement, that gets into something that's a little bit darker. Of course, I don't get into stuff like that. I hear about things like that through ufology. And then through the occult and like, the Third Reich and all this other stuff, torture might have been used and hypnosis at the same time. If you torture someone and you split their ego or their mind, you can have another personality to start with where you could build up a potential warrior or soldier out of torture. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. How much of it is legitimate? Well, obviously I'm not going to be practicing anything like that, and neither would anybody else be, that I know of. So we don't really, with hypnosis, we don't really get into that. We might know about it, but in terms of brainwashing, if you're not willing or you don't want to be hypnotized, you can't really be hypnotized. Now let's take a look at something in marketing. I can send you a picture of how Starbucks uses hypnosis or hypnotic suggestions to try to subvert your spending or your purchasing. This is something that's a little bit lighter, that's not so dark. So if you and I were into marketing, I'm into marketing because I have to find clients. So one thing that I learned about marketing after I got into it is marketing uses hypnosis. Well, that's a bunch of BS. Well, that's not, that's unethical. Why would companies be spending a ton of money trying to use hypnotic suggestions to change our buying or our spending habits? That's not fair. But it's not really criminal at the same time. So there's lots of little subliminal things going on, constantly bombarding your subconscious that you may not really be consciously aware of, but that are out there. So maybe we could talk about this on a little bit of a lighter note. In terms of social engineering, and then in hypnotizing people to brainwash them, that's some heavy stuff. That's basically criminal behavior, really. I mean, it's completely unethical. If you go up to any hypnotist and you ask them about brainwashing and all this other stuff, totally unethical.
I think I've been brainwashed by McDonald's. I'm loving it. That I fucking know.
Well, there you go. Now they're using tone. They're using melody, and they're attaching feelings to melody, and then they just play it over and over again until you accept it. But this is on a big budget where they're spending millions of dollars bombarding you with visuals and sound, trying to affect your spending. So that's completely legal. Companies do it. Neuroscience is used in marketing. Psychology, the way that we buy things, is used in marketing. It's unbelievable. It kind of, you look at some of these labels and they look like they're just too perfect. There's something behind it. It seems like to me, and it's probably Well, anytime you go to buy something, there's been a ton of money spent on trying to make it easy for you to buy whatever product it is that you're looking at. The positioning of it, the branding. I mean, it's strategically positioned towards a certain person or a certain demographic in the market. So that's there's a ton of money spent on that in research. It's unbelievable. Now even more so than ever, because we have all this analytics and all this stuff off of the internet, all of the retargeting and conversion rates and this other stuff that we didn't have back in the day. When marketing was simple, it was like about archetypes and Coca-Cola, and they didn't have all of the analytics and stuff. But now it gets really, they got it nailed down to a science nowadays. But it's kind of interesting.
Buying products for a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
I see the commercial.
Yeah, well, the thing is that we can access the same information. You can on Facebook, if you wanted to advertise, you can target your market right down. I mean, you could drop a bomb right on an X with Facebook. It's unbelievable how they can target. So at least we have access to it and we know what's going on. But I didn't even understand until I got into marketing that companies use hypnotic suggestion or hypnotic words to try to affect our buying or our spending. I didn't even know that. Yeah. So I was kind of shocked. To me, that's kind of unethical. As a hypnotist,
it seems pretty bad. I mean, it's almost, it seems very unethical to me.
Yeah. So at least we tell you we're trying to do it. Hey, I'm trying to hypnotize you. Now, if you don't want to do it, then you don't have to do it, and we won't do it. But I at least tell you up front. It's kind of like the name of the business, occult service. What is the occult? It's just trying to control people based on their beliefs. Yeah. A belief is something you can't prove. So a lot of occultists will try to use people's fears to control them. Think about Charlie Manson or any of these cult figures.
Do you think Charlie Manson used like that hypnotizing his followers?
Well, I mean, he was definitely an occultist. I mean, I don't spend too much time reading about him, but hey, I'm gonna be 50, so I had to pay attention to Charlie Manson in the 80s because honestly, there was either this was on TV or we had that on TV or there was just reruns and that was it. So we were kind of forced to watch stuff that we didn't really want to see. 60 Minutes, what else is there on Sunday? I don't know. So we had to sit through it. So in terms of what went on behind closed doors with him, it's hard to say. There might have been a lot of drugs involved too, but once again, using people's fears to control them. That's kind of the secret of the occult. If you find people that are afraid of shit, you use that shit to control their behavior. That's one of the secrets of the occult or of an occultist. You'll find someone, you'll find what they're scared of, and you can use that to manipulate them. And they're only scared of a belief. A belief is something you can't prove. Yeah. So don't be scared of something that's not scientific.
That makes sense.
So I deal with people that, think their houses are haunted and all this other nonsense. When we get into the fundamentals of hypnosis, we talk about hallucinations, positive, negative hallucinations, pareidolia, ideomotor effect, Ouija boards, all this other nonsense. Once people learn how to control their own hallucinations and understand they're doing most of it with their own mind anyway, then it kind of clears up the picture, takes all of the fog away. Yeah. So our perception of reality is pretty bad to begin with, unfortunately.
So like, give me a lowdown on maybe a couple different techniques that...
Well, the eye exercises that I sent you, we use those for what's called a positive or a negative hallucination. And these can be done at will. A positive hallucination is when you make something appear in your line of sight that's not there, which you can do with your mind. We do it all of the time, but we just don't realize it. A negative hallucination is when you make something disappear. It's right in front of you, but you can't see it because your mind makes it disappear. Perfect example is when your significant other tells you to go do something. Go find something. Hey, I can't find it. I looked all over the place. I can't find your whatever, your keys. I can't find this. I can't find that. Sorry, go look on your own. I'm tired of wasting time with it. And it's right in front of your sight because you don't want to look for it. So you've just erased it from your memory or from your line of sight. Positive and negative hallucinations. Now, doing eye exercises, which is a quick way of hypnotizing, that's one way that you can actually control and practice it on your own. But let's say you see a ghost. Well, you're probably just creating that hallucination in your line of sight. And this can happen when we're scared, too. If you listen to what's going on in the news about when police officers are talking about how they see people with guns in their hands and all this other stuff and they didn't have it, you can put a gun in someone's hand even if they're not holding a gun if you're scared. That's why our perception of reality is pretty bad, and people they don't really understand it. When you learn about it through hypnosis, you might think twice. Hey, you might want to slow that car down a little bit, drive the speed limit, keep everything out of your hands, and really pay attention because your eyes are real poor to begin with. We get into, I used to do martial arts back in the 70s. Then I got into commercial driving, And these two areas of study talk about how the eyes interpret reality. Okay, so in driving, they talk about what's called peripheral vision. So peripherally, we see shadows that we don't really see in our direct line of vision. So if you hear somebody say, well, I saw a shadow figure out of the corner of my eye. Well, yeah, your eye sees shadow that way, but it's not a shadow figure. You're just seeing shadow. That's the way your eye works. It's just like that.
Yeah.
So when you look to see the shadow, it was gone. Well, that's because it only existed in your peripheral line of sight. So you have to understand that.
So if someone's blind, can you hypnotize them?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hypnotize them with sound, or, well, we could use Braille. I mean, obviously, if they're not deaf, but we could trace the eye gymnastics or eye yoga, and then they could basically do them with their eyes closed. I always do that with the eyes closed anyway, except if you do the eye drop, your eyes are open. You take your eyes all the way to the top of your forehead until you feel a strain, and then as you slowly lower your eyes, you'll close your eyelids. So the eye drop you actually do with your eyes open. But the rest of the eye yoga, you could do with your eyes open or closed. It doesn't matter. And then there's also breathing techniques that go along with that too. You don't want to hold your breath. A lot of people might hold their breath. That's not a good idea.
No, for a long period of time, then you pass out.
Yeah. It's like fighting. Remember I talked about martial arts, right?
Yeah.
What's the first thing they teach you in fighting is about your breath.
Yeah.
You go and you're throwing punches and you're holding your breath. The next thing you know, you're gassed out and you get knocked out. So that's another important thing. What I learned through martial arts was how the eye interprets reality. We see movement first, color, and then shadow. So one thing that our eye struggles with is shadow, being able to interpret what's going on in that numbra or penumbra of shadow. And then there's something else called anthropomorphic complex, where we just start making things up because we don't have the answer to it. And even scientists, well, we don't know what it is. Well, then it must be God. Well, then a couple years go by, we discover the math, and it's not God anymore. It's just math. You follow?
So let me ask you a question. This is for all the single men out there.
Uh-oh.
They're at a bar. Give them a couple tips how to hypnotize some women.
Well, I mean, nowadays, you just go and find who you want on the internet. You don't have to do all that nonsense anymore.
That's true. The bars are even actually closed. But
Don't go to bars, man. That's the old school. Forget chemistry. It's all compatibility nowadays. Go on the internet and you'll get and just dial in whatever you want. You don't need to see the future anymore. You just go on the internet, you tell it exactly what you want, and then you go from there.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe they don't want to, the little hippies.
No.
Nobody,
Oh, man, it's not. That's the old school way of doing it. I mean, that'll get you on, what is it, the Me Too generation or whatever. Don't bother. Just go, if they're not on the internet looking, don't bother trying to
sue.
don't bother looking for it on the street, because they're not looking for anything on the street. If they're serious about looking for something, they're on the internet looking for it. Otherwise, it's just don't even bother, man. You'll save yourself a lot of frustration.
Yeah. Can you hypnotize animals? Like say your dog?
There's some people that, I mean, there's because animals, I don't necessarily work with animals. I've got dogs. I don't try to hypnotize them, but animals will respond to people in certain ways through speech, or there's things that you could do if you went on the internet and looked at about hypnotizing animals or animal trainers or that kind of thing. Whether or not they incorporate hypnosis, I don't know. I've never interviewed any of them because that's out of my my niche, let's say. But there's stuff on the internet about hypnotizing animals that I've seen. And then I've seen it on shows where they hypnotize animals. Some kid will come in and they'll work with different animals and put them to sleep and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm not exactly sure.
I see some of these videos. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the way that ours does, but I mean, pretty similar.
I see some of these videos. These Russians got these cougars in their house, and I don't know how the hell. That's crazy. That's some Russian shit right there, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
But do you think maybe they hypnotize these cougars or just?
Well, they probably drug them. Remember, the drugs work quicker than hypnosis. When you go to the doctor, do you want to get hypnotized or do you want anesthetics? You want drugs, man.
Fuck yeah, dude.
You want drugs, right? So hypnosis is something more on a lighter side.
Drugs, everybody.
There you go. Stress release, relaxation. That's kind of how I got into it. And then the paranormal was something that I got into that was completely different than your basic run-of-the-mill smoking cessation, right? That's another one. Stress release, relaxation, a hypnotic timeline or regression therapy, that kind of thing. So the paranormal is not really a classical form of hypnosis. That's kind of a niche that I got into.
So,
after I got into it, I didn't.
Let me ask you a question here.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, people meditate. It sounds like this is almost like meditation in some sort. If you hypnotize yourself, isn't that technically like a meditation type of thing?
Yeah, in a way. Mm-hmm. Meditation normally might take a little bit longer to get into. With hypnosis, within a couple of seconds, you should be able to get into a good meditative state, and then it should save you some time. So it's like a quicker way of doing it. Sometimes it's hard to quiet the mind, to get the mind to stop running and to just to focus or to hyper-focus, which is what hypnosis is, the ability to hyper-focus. So sometimes you can use hypnosis if you're finding it hard to meditate.
Yeah.
You can combine.
When you're doing, that makes sense. It makes sense if you're doing it by yourself. Say if you want someone to do a particular, if you hypnotize them and you want them to do a particular task, they would tell me a task that they want to improve on, and while they're in hypnosis, we would give them a positive suggestion. Yeah.
So that's one way of programming the brain, is what you were talking about before, engineering the brain.
Yeah.
So while if we went under a deeper session, it might take 10, 15, 20 minutes to get that deep into the session. The different scripts or things that we might read. And then at that point, we would give them a suggestion, and then we could also ask them to forget or suppress that suggestion and not remember it by the time they woke up, which may or may not work. Sometimes it takes a couple of different sessions. But that's normally when a positive reinforcement will happen, is when they're actually under.
So, how do you get them under? What do you say?
So there's different scripts different scripts or stories. Once we get them into a shallow, range of hypnosis, then we might go a little bit deeper. There's countdowns, different meditations. A lot of times I'll just have people pick one that they might want to do, and then once we get into a shallow state of hypnosis, we'll just continue the session a little bit longer, until like maybe 10 or 15 minutes, until they're that much more deeper into the session. And then a lot of it's kind of performance based. It's all based on the client.
Yeah.
Some people may have a little bit of a hard time getting there, and they need more practice on their own before they want to get together. Everyone's different. And it's also private too. I try not to, so you might be different than the next person. So it's pretty highly individual.
I saw like CSI or whatever those shows are. And they hypnotize one of their victims. Is that a real thing? Do you know?
Let's see. Were they using torture? You mean they were?
No, they were. They got. Someone got tortured. Yeah, and they forgot about the torture, or they're trying to get a really fine detail of whatever happened for evidence or whatever, and they hypnotize them, and they kind of slow down what happened, and they could get some information. Is that
we could have used pentothal, sodium pentothal. I mean, I've heard stories of the military using that.
Yeah.
Using drugs.
Pentothal,
sodium pentothal. I think even the FBI, even the police use that stuff. The forensic, like the investigators and stuff like that. They may or may not use that on inmates. I don't know how. I mean, it's probably not legal unless you authorize the use of it on yourself. But waterboarding, pentothal. Playing Metallica nonstop.
Oh no, I'm not talking about torture. I'm talking about someone that is a victim, then goes to the police later on, and then they hypnotize them to find the details out that they don't remember. But I guess you're saying, okay, we got the answer on that one.
Like forensic hypnosis.
Yeah.
It can be used in post-traumatic stress. Normally it would be used to separate the trauma. The subject has to view the trauma, separate themselves from it before they actually start talking about it, so that it's less stressful. So there's protocols to use for post-traumatic stress.
Now, is there some kind of certification that you could get?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. What are we talking about?
Well, what I did was through the National Guild. It was just basic certification. I think it was 40 hours of classroom, and then I also had to do performance, because pretty much hypnosis is a performance art. Yeah. It's like playing an instrument, sort of. So you got to get up in front of people and do it, which is kind of scary, actually. It's like having to play an instrument in front of a bunch of people. but for the different types of, there's like 7-path hypnosis, 5-path hypnosis, forensic, there's all kinds. So each different type, there's a different certification that would go with it.
I see.
That costs money, and you got to go to school for it, and there's different places where you can go. Now with COVID, I don't even know. You know, it's going to be, everything's completely different. Now, if you wanted to, there's psychics that use hypnosis. Are they trained for it? No, not necessarily. Can they still use it? Yeah. But they, you know, I couldn't say, if I wanted to do something like that, I couldn't use the National Guild, because they wouldn't be cool with that.
Is that the main one, or is there other ones, or is that like?
Oh yeah, no, there's other ones. There's ones in Canada and different places around the world. They have their own, you know, unions and stuff like that. That's just like the largest one in America, and also the oldest one. So plus the people that I was training with, they were in the same union. So I just, you know, I trained with Karen Hand and Larry Garrett. Larry Garrett's got the largest studio, which is over in Avondale. He's in the National Guild, and then the gal that I trained with, Karen Hand, if you Google Karen Hand Hypnosis, she's also in the National Guild too. So, and I already knew her, so I asked her to train me.
Yeah.
So we did some training about 5 years ago on top of what I learned with Dr. Resnick. So that was so I could get on the internet and actually say stuff, and so I could get insurance too.
Oh, okay. So you're doing the hypnotist, but you're a real estate. You're in real estate and something or another. What do you?
Well, my brand, you know, the way branding works, I'm a realtor and a hypnotist. So I'm in the wellness space, emotional wellness, financial wellness, that kind of thing. So social media, it's just organic, you know. Who are you? What do you do? Put it up there and let's go with it. I mean, it's all grassroots. So.
Well, that makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, everyone, you know, you have to have a certain thing. There's so much information out there. If you're kind of broad, that you get lost in the shuffle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be my space, in the space of wellness.
Yeah.
Emotional wellness, financial wellness.
I'd like to have you back on the show. This has been good, and too bad the video is not working. Anything you want to add at the very end here?
Well, let's we'll work on the technology. Water can also be used. We didn't get into CE5 yet either, because hypnosis can be used in ufology, and that's, once again, this is kind of like the space that I'm in. So we didn't get into CE5 or using what's called hypnosis water. This is taking different frequencies and then charging the water, drinking the water actually before doing hypnosis. So it could act as just a placebo, or who knows, maybe. I mean, nobody's really researching the effects of aqua resonance. We're kind of...
So wait, what are you talking about, charging the water? What does that mean?
Well, we'll use tuning forks, and we'll take a water in, you know, like a plastic jar or a plastic jug, let's say, and then we'll you hit the tuning fork and then use the resonance on the actual water before ingesting it. So that's called hypnosis water. Now in CE5, there's something called aqua resonance. A gal by the name of Veda Austin, if you Google Veda Austin, she suggested for CE5 sessions, bring a black bowl out into the wilderness with you, fill it with water, and then run the frequency, the lunar frequency, 21042 hertz, run that through the water while you're trying to do the CE5 connection or connecting with aliens or ETs. I thought that was kind of far out. So, but for that, you would have to use the alien tone recording. So you have to get that out of my music player.
So do you use tuning fork with like E or what?
No, see, this gets back in the 80s. I was going to be a piano tuner, right? So I was learning piano tuning, and they taught me about 440, but then we talked about the standard pitch back in box time. What are you talking about? The standard pitch? 440 is all there is, man. Whatever's on the keyboard, that's all the notes. And there's a million different notes out there. We've just chosen to use 440A, okay? Back into the classical times and in box time, we're assuming they use a lower pitch because of the type of instruments they used. And then they had to use animal sinew or catgut for strings. Obviously, you can't tighten them that tight or they're going to, pop. So we're assuming that their standard pitch was lower back then. So then what is standard pitch? Well, it's whatever you want it to be. So when I do what's called UFO tunings or scientific tunings, we're not in 440. We're not on the keyboard. Does that make any sense?
No, yeah, it does. It does make sense.
So in terms of what a UFO is tuned to, I'm pretty sure they're not in 440, right? So when we do like the alien tone, that's a drone. So that's the natural harmonic overtones and subtones. It's not in what's called the equal temperament. Okay, got that? The piano is in an equal temperament so that we could modulate and change keys and it's all good. Well, that's not digital hypnosis and trying to communicate with ETs. We're not really using the keyboard. We're trying to get into the sound of the spheres. That's all of the tones out there. It's just a mess of frequencies. So if you want to use a Jupiter frequency and the lunar frequency, or, you know, none of it's going to be in 440. Got it? Yeah. So the tuning forks, well, I would use them just to get a bass pitch in the recording studio because I'm in 440. Well, I know we're not going to use 440 recording something for ET contact. So we're going to use 210.42 hertz, which is a frequency of the moon, right? 210.42. If you Google it on the internet, it'll tell you the frequency of Earth, frequency of the moon, 210.42 hertz. Great. Now, how am I going to tune to that? Well, okay. I got myself a tuning fork. I got the bass pitch. I got to go back and retune the guitar, right, to 210.42 hertz. So that's kind of like an A flat. It's sort of between an A and an A flat, or maybe an A or an A sharp. I forget what it is. But it's not in 440. It's not on the keyboard.
Yeah.
So just trying to get a pitch to start with right off the bat, that in itself is a struggle. But it's so much easier with digital technology. You know, trying to do this back in the 80s with a pitch pipe, forget it. I used to try to do this with bagpipes. Forget it.
Jesus.
And then finally, 20 years ago, and now, you know, I'm sitting with a lap guitar using a digital tuner. We've got it nailed to the exact 0.10, you know, and then we go from there. Yeah. So it's so much easier now. And then we can just auto tune and correct the pitch in Pro Tools when we go back and do the editing and the mix down and all that. So now we can tune specific pitches and try and put them together to manipulate nature in some way.
It makes sense.
Now how would we do it? Well, you know, this requires a budget, of course, you know, and I have to work for a living, so I don't always have the free time that I'd like to just go out in the woods and play all these different tones and try and put them together and make a tree fall over or whatever. I mean, but you know, something out there can happen like that. That's just, you know, the laws of physics. Yeah. And sound are a big part of it. You know, a building can fall over, right? If it vibrates in a certain way, a building can collapse. So wait a second, how does that work? So these laws are in nature. It's just a matter of learning how to manipulate them, how to control them. So, but anyway,
I wonder what the range is for a dog. You know how many hertz, and that's one.
Well, they normally hear. Yeah, they normally hear higher than we do. I know my producer told me that women generally have their high end is a little better than ours, than men. Their high end, they can hear a little bit better. Their high end frequencies. But dogs, of course, hear, you know, like a dog whistle. We don't even hear that. Yeah. If I start messing with my tuning forks, my dogs go nuts, and I don't even, you know, they're hearing all of the overtones and those high pitches and stuff like that.
Huskies?
No, I got little chihuahuas.
Yeah, I love chihuahuas. Badass.
Yeah, you know, like little fairies, little tiny little animals, or just
teacups.
Little teacups. Yeah, they're toys. Nice. They're too small to even breed. They're just
they're like my each other all day.
My mother-in-law was a breeder, and so my wife's like this animal rescuer. So she would always take all of the tiny little ones that, you know, just weren't right wouldn't be ethical to sell a dog as a breeder that the person couldn't breed with, because they're either their joints or they're not, you know, they're deformed a little bit. So she would always take the runts of the litter, and then we ended up with 5 of them. I told her stop at 2, but whatever, that's how it goes. So, but now that we've got them all, I couldn't part. You know, I take them all over the place. We couldn't part with them. So.
Do you ever try to hypnotize them?
Well, I hypnotize them with food. Yeah, all of the time.
Sweet.
So instead of drugs, their panacea is going to be food, jerkies. They watch the jerky. They recognize the package. When I go and I touch the plastic, automatically I have their attention.
Wow.
So as soon as I touch the package, they're hypnotized because they know they're going to get food.
I think they love you.
So they're completely spoiled. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I think once we get the technology going, then we'll just pick something that we could segment into, and we'll just talk about like one topic because there's a lot to cover, and then a lot of it I'm still researching with. So. I'm still learning all kinds of stuff too.
Okay.
But one thing, when I mentioned real estate, I do want to buy with a group of investors. I want to buy the Marilyn Monroe death house. That was one reason why I got into real estate.
Where's that at?
Well, it's out in Brentwood, California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be haunted, and I really don't believe in hauntings and stuff like that. So I thought if it was, I could find out. So that's one reason why.
Is it open to the public? Is it like
no, I don't. I think it's always been owned just by investors. It was sold a couple of years ago for like 7-point-something million. Completely ridiculous. So. Yeah, well, I said a group of investors, right?
Yeah, but I mean, still, that's just
yeah.
Investing in ghosts, man. You could just do
there. You go, man. What's the point, right?
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, well, that could be good. You could do a little social engineering on the business meeting on this one.
Well, yeah, I'd like to set up the technology there, and
yeah.
the only reason why I'm saying is because I've always been my dad was involved in the Kennedy conspiracy. He always watched that. He was in Vietnam, so he always he hated Lyndon Baines, Big Ears Johnson. Always hated Lyndon Baines. Had a soft spot for Kennedy just because he thought that Kennedy would have got us out of Vietnam, even though he got us in Vietnam. He didn't feel that the military-industrial complex Kennedy would have been involved with so much that Lyndon Johnson was in terms of upscaling Vietnam for profit. Yeah. So that's how I got into the whole conspiracy thing back in the 80s. But then what would be more on brand for me would be the Maryland conspiracy, not JFK or RFK. So I've been following that since the 80s, but that's how I heard about the house. And then since the house has always been haunted, I've always wondered. I mean, we have a lot of haunted places in Chicago. We have mob pits. Across any corner, and there's something mafia or whatever. So we've got all of the haunted places here too, just like other cities. But I'm never really been too much interested in those. So, but remember, architecture contains archetypes, and archetypes are the secrets of the universe.
Well, I like to talk. Well, thanks for being on the show today. But I'd like to bring you back and get the video working.
Yep.
And talk particulars, and maybe go down the line and have a few more of these. But thanks a lot for being on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Be safe and be well.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
The Interviewer with Beef Tech.